So this is the Financial Times, which we call the Financial Crimes, and this is the item on page 8 of today's Financial Crimes that justifies our renaming the title as the Financial Crimes. For example, the heading is Accounts Alert Dents Stocks Linked to India Tycoon Adani. Report cites freeze by depository. Ports unit rails at erroneous claim. Now, all of this is completely, absolutely alien to the experience and the knowledge of the many, both in India and in Britain and elsewhere where this particular company is operating. So the last two paragraphs give away the game. That is to say that the Financial Crimes is actually peddling lies and myths. It says analysts at Citigroup reiterated their buy call yesterday for Adani ports, saying developments related to insufficient disclosure were unlikely to have an impact on the company's prospects. And the last paragraph is India's stock market has recently hit record highs, even as the economy struggles to recover from a severe second wave of coronavirus infections. Now, this is an absolute, utter, brazen, stupid pack of lies. India is not represented in this kind of stock market. Most of India, the billion plus people are unaware, literally unaware of the tycoon Adani. Literally, they have never heard of Adani. So who are the people that are involved in the business of Adani stocks? It says one is Stephanie Findlay, said to be in Delhi, and Hudson Lockett, said to be in Hong Kong. And it says shares in companies linked to Indian tycoon Gautam Adani, one of Asia's richest men, fell sharply yesterday after a report that the country's largest securities depository had frozen accounts held by foreign funds holding stakes worth billions of dollars. Now, absolute rubbish means nothing to the billion plus people in India, and means nothing to the billions of people around the world, nothing to the billions of people in Asia itself. So this is Financial Crimes. This is not telling readers what is going on. This is blocks of garbage imposed under news. What news? What is going on? There is no description of what this is referring to. By saying the largest securities depository had frozen accounts held by foreign funds holding stakes worth billions of dollars. 4 of the 6 listed Adani Group companies fell by the maximum amount permitted by exchange rules, while the billionaire's flagship Adani Ports and Special Economic Zone plunged as much as 19%. It's absolute meaningless. Who is involved? Who are the people involved in the plunge? And how is this related to the second wave of coronavirus infections. If the infections don't affect the people doing the business in the Adani companies, then who are the people being affected by the infections? So there is a big gap. There is big gap. There is big emptiness. There is big darkness. So this is the accounts alert dense stocks linked to India tycoon Adani. What stocks? And opposite that page, which is page 9, is an advertisement. Advertisement by and for FT Advisor. FT is this advisor, this paper, the Financial Crimes. And it has got absolutely no fact. Who are the people that the FT Advisor advises? And advises on what? And advises on what criteria? What regulation? There is no mention. There is no description. So the Financial Crimes is a secret, kind of secretive collection of secret business. And there is no mention either about the UK so-called economy or about the 6 other members of the G7, which supposedly were represented in the G7 summit, so-called, held in Cornwall for 3 days, so-called. And the communique that has been issued at the end of the so-called summit doesn't mention the many, either in Britain or in Germany or in France or the United States or in Japan, the countries that are among the G7 members, or in Canada. So this is a brazen robbery of the right to knowledge of what is going on and who is running what and what are the actual potential for the many to take part in the activities of the lying markets. How is it that in India, the economy is struggling with the second wave of the coronavirus, and yet the business of this company, Adani Group, is not affected? I mean, do these people exist or are they invisibles, aliens? And the evidence of the contents of the Financial Crimes shows that they are aliens, that they don't actually have physical entities, bodies, like ordinary people. So where do they exist? Yesterday, on Monday, that is, the Financial Crimes on page 23 had this item, radical reform of pensions provision is urgent. Again, Martin Wolf, who gets the so-called opinions spot there, he doesn't refer to the many in Britain. He doesn't refer to the actual individual human beings. And his piece ends in this paragraph. The whole piece by this Martin Wolf is complete and absolute insult to the intelligence. This is codes. This is codes like plastic pieces. They are not human. They are not related to the planet Earth, not to people's bills, people's contributions to other people's wealth. That is the Marxist kind of benefit. That is the contribution made by the workers to the profits of the owners of the factories and the production bases. And this is written in the codes of the darkness. It doesn't relate to people doing the shopping, relate to people struggling with the bills, people struggling with shortages. Nothing. No human being is in existence in this piece by Martin Wolf. And so moving on to the Briloped's apparent launch of the ghastly biased news is this piece by Gillian Reynolds. Now, Gillian Reynolds was for 500 years the radio kind of expert on the BBC. And she joins the I newspaper today. This is her first column on page 17. And she promotes the piece. She promotes the piece which has got a picture, the photographs of people. There are 2, 3, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 women that are of, well, they look white. They could be from any background, European background. And there are 2, 3 women that look African origin. So 5 and 3, 8, and the rest are men. So that picture is captioned Andrew Neil, 7th from right, and the GB News presenting team. And it's a picture credited to Gareth Milner, GB News and Press Association. And its heading is GB News regulatory regionality is welcome, but teething problems with sound and too much hot air were not welcome. So what she's saying is GB News will make news, probably more from Andrew Neil's interviews than from assorted presenters sitting around a table commenting on each other. So that is absolutely factual. Commenting on each other, that is. And the fact that she's saying GB News will probably make news, probably more from Andrew Neil's interviews. Now that is probably her ingratiation continuing, because she starts with the ingratiation. She says, I like Andrew Neil. I don't always agree with him, but I respect, and she reinforces the respect bit. She says, I respect, comma, seriously respect his news sense. There is no such thing as news sense. Either he's lying or he's telling the truth, which is not the case. He's lying more often than not. That is not acceptable. The lying, that is not acceptable because Gillian Reynolds says that she seriously respects him. And her whole first paragraph is shamelessly, disgracefully, dishonestly, untruthfully, offensively untrue. Here is the whole content of the first paragraph. I like Andrew Neil. I don't always agree with him, but I respect, seriously respect, his news sense. The BBC was foolish or badly advised to lose him from its roster of pundits. As an irritant, a bar under the saddle of political reportage, he has no equal. As a news mogul, he is less reliable. On the evidence so far of GB News, his new television network, he appears to have become a prisoner of some serious delusions. Now, that is true, but that is absolutely contradictory and contradicting the rest of that particular sentence. Why is she doing that? She's trying to tell the truth, but she is herself a prisoner of her ingratiating kind of priority and agenda and tactic. She doesn't want to lose the respect of or admiration of Andrew Neil. Seriously doesn't want to lose the admiration of Andrew Neil. And then she goes on like this. Every single paragraph of Gillian Reynolds is full of contradictions, which takes us back to the lying and lies of Fleet Street and the BBC and the Sky News and ITV and Channel 4 News, and of the congenital liar Boris Johnson. So this is Gillian Reynolds showing her expertise. And in focusing on her expertise, which is based on her ingratiation to Andrew Neil, she is actually failing. This is her first column, and this is not based on any original understanding of the duties of broadcasting and journalism. That's her piece. And we shall talk more about Gillian Reynolds and her initial column for the I newspaper in due course. And we shall show that Gillian Reynolds, who has said that Andrew Neil appears to have become a prisoner of some serious delusions, that Gillian Reynolds is herself a faker of the platform, because she is not actually diagnosing the GB News, either as she says she saw it on Sunday and yesterday, Monday. And the news on broadcasting on page 21 covers GB News. And the headline is completely, absolutely false and dishonest. And they say that GB News newcomer pulls in more viewers than Sky and BBC. And it says, in the opinion, GB News hits airwaves with a bang as opinionated presenters hold forth. And it has got clockwise from Maine. There is a picture. There are three pictures there. One is GB News first night included Michelle Dewberry. Now, Dewberry is a corrupt, racist Brexiteer. And we shall have more about Dewberry and our corrupt Brexiteering racism in due course. So GB News' first night included Michelle Dewberry above, with Nigel Farage among those looking on, and staff watching Andrew Neil presenting. And the writer, who is Benjamin Butterworth, concludes his piece. In the last paragraph, he says, in the process, I gained a respect for the opinionated hosts who have 6,500 hours of live TV a year to fill. 3 hours of defending Chris Whitty and Black Lives Matter. And I was ready for a strong tea and bed. And it is exactly like Gillian Reynolds. It's promoting the names, the myths of the names, as well as the absolutely shameless ingratiation by this Benjamin Butterworth. He says, as the channel's CEO, Angelos Frangopoulos said just months ago, the channel was little more than a PowerPoint representation. Reading again. As the channel's CEO, Angelos Frangopoulos, said just months ago, the channel was little more than a PowerPoint presentation. This week, it is a vibrant, bold television news channel, fronted by some of the best known names in British media. That's it. That is the giveaway of this stupidity. What is the name in British media? There is no way that these people could be called some of the best known names in the British media. Unless, of course, by the British media, they are meaning, this Benjamin Butterworth is meaning, the status quo liars and fakers and fiddlers. There is no mention of the society that they're supposed to be addressing. It's about capturing the share of the audience. I mean, why people watch something is not explained, and why both the BBC and Sky News are shown here in this claim as having lost in viewing figures on the two nights. So there is no recognition in either promotion carried by the I newspaper. Byline to Gillian Reynolds or Benjamin Butterworth. And the scum, as well as the Daily Mail, are of course in denial of the social responsibility owed to the people that might get infected or might get ill with the virus. It is a despairing headline. It is not about the real lives of people, real lives of the victims of the failures of Johnson over the last 14 months. And the mail continues, the scum continues with this. So that's the front page, and it continues there inside. This is part A of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, being broadcast only on the internet, not on satellite, not on terrestrial. And we concentrate on and carry out investigation, world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. When we say world exclusive, we literally mean world exclusive, because as we have shown in the diagnosis of Gillian Reynolds' promotion and ingratiation piece to Brylopad's promotion as the superstar, because she says twice in the same paragraph that she she respects the Brylopad, and then she repeats she seriously respects the Brylopad. Now, since the 1970s and 1980s, when Neil was foisted on the television channel rather than given jobs, executive jobs and editorial jobs at The Economist, Neil has come across, in my observation of everything he has fronted and presented, as a deeply corrupt, deeply dishonest, deeply antisocial individual who has not only no hesitation in promoting immoral, greedy agenda and interests, but has no awareness of the fact that society, the many people in society, are being sidelined, ignored, forgotten by the agenda that he has been corruptly, opportunistically, and careeristically determined to identify with. And that is what this ghastly, biased bullshit, the ghastly bullshit GB News is about. And the fact that the Fleet Street papers, the ones that are promoting the past 2 nights, and they're not talking about the many, they're not talking about the society, not talking about the most highly kind of tiered and slaughtered political event of the Western controlled alliance of G7. There is no mention of G7. There is no mention of the environment. There is no mention of the campaigns for the planet. That shows the emptiness of Fleet Street, the emptiness of the I newspaper, the emptiness of the rest of Fleet Street. They are contemptuous, and they're contemptibly contemptuous of the lives, the realities, the struggles, the experience of the many in society. And the fact that GB News has not addressed the people and the people's needs shows that it is not news. It is not new. It is an aggravation of the existing status quo of so-called Fleet Street and the British media mainstream. And the editorial page, so-called, of the editorial column of the so-called Sun has got the longest one against the delay of the withdrawal of the lockdown, and the second longest one is headed Bashir Bankam. Can any sentient BBC executive in 2016 have been unaware of the Martin Bashir scandal? The internal probe into his rehiring is a joke. The reporter was exposed in 1996 over the forged bank statement linked to his Princess Diana interview. Mark surrounded later interviews too. Mark, that is M-U-R-K, Mark, that is dirt. Not only did the BBC rehire him, their inquiry claims it was above board, and those making the decision didn't know the extent of Bashir's skullduggery. Rubbish. What was publicly known was a big enough red flag. It simply defies belief. Well, it does simply defy belief, just as every attempt by the scum owned and controlled by Rupert Murdoch, Dirty Digger, to have any morality is defying belief and disbelief as well. And the partner or husband or boyfriend of the editor of The Guardian, Adrian Childs, is given a space in the scum. And I advisedly refer to the connection. We shall come to that defying of conflict of interest, because like the editor of The Private Lie, who has been made millions of pounds of license fee payers' money by the BBC under the pretext of the Have I Got News for You, because that is bribing Ian Pissoff. The bribing by the BBC so that Private Eye doesn't run seriously investigative pieces about the BBC corruption, BBC racism, and so on. Of course, the Private Lie itself being racist, it would not necessarily be the source of any worry by the BBC executives that the Private Lie might carry investigative pieces about the BBC's racism. But investigative pieces is the core point, that by bribing Ian Pissoff, the BBC executives and crooks in control of the commissioning and bribery projects at the BBC made sure that Ian Pissoff would not dare go into the areas of BBC corruption, which would compromise his contracts on the Have I Got News slot, which he has been running for practically the entire period since he was given the spot to, quote, edit The Private Eye by Richard Ingrams in the mid-1980s. So what we are saying here is that the media is littered with corruption. The BBC is littered with corruption. The scum is littered with corruption. And here, although the editorial piece appears to be critical of the BBC, the news item on page 17 headed, "Well, what a surprise. BBC clears itself over Bashir job." Now, has the scum ever found any of its role as dodgy, as worthy of condemnation, worthy of exposure? It hasn't. So morally, the scum is condemning something in the BBC's behavior that this scum itself is guilty of as a routine. Of course, the BBC is wrong to have rehired Martin Bashir, despite being told that it is Bashir's CB and the record is full of dodgy doings and his skullduggery and his lying. Of course, that is wrong. But the same kind of behavior by the scum must be condemned equally as well. But the scum doesn't. So it says the BBC clears itself over Bashir job. BBC probe says no cover-up. And it says that the BBC has cleared itself over claims that Martin Bashir was rehired to cover up his Panorama interview with Princess Diana. The corporation, that is the BBC, said the allegations were completely unfounded. Its internal review conceded bosses knew he had faked documents to land his 1995 scoop, but felt enough time had passed. Felt by the BBC executives. But the BBC concluded that Bashir would not have been reappointed if bosses had known everything they did now. Former Panorama reporter Bashir below was recruited in 2016 and promoted to religious editor 2 years later. 2 years ago. 2 years later. It was despite doubts about his scoop and offensive remarks made in the United States. The report said there were shortcomings in the recruitment process, but it added, I have found no evidence that Martin Bashir was rehired to contain and or cover up the events surrounding the 1995 Panorama program. Former Director General Lord Tony Hall will be questioned by MPs today. Today meaning Tuesday, and we shall be updating on that when we have enough confirmation of the contents of the interview. And this will be a routine kind of thing by a so-called select committee of members of parliament. These select committees never have any repercussions, any consequences, any traction of what they do. They have news contents in the sense that contents of some of the interviews, some of the appearees before the committees feature in news longer or at all in comparison with some others. For example, the 26th of May 2021 interview by Dominic Cummings before the Business and Technical Select Committee has been, of course, for various reasons, featured in news more than anybody else. And here is a two-page spread, pages 28 to 29, by the husband of the murdered MP Joe Cox. This is rare, and this is rare because of the fact that this was an MP. Joe Cox was a Labour Party MP, and she stood for values that almost universally the daily scum, Murdoch scum, opposed and was hostile to. And the hatred that was involved in her murder must be traced back to the hateful racist campaign by the scum itself over the years, leading to the murder. So what they're doing here, this scum, is doing a completely dishonest kind of fakery. They're pretending to be respectful in the objective sense, respectful of the values that Joe Cox stood for. That also shows the significance of having high moral values, because in the whole context of the British politicians, Joe Cox is regarded after her murder as someone with high principles and values and morality. Now, what is the lesson there? For Keir Starmer, who has murdered the Labour Party, politically murdered the Labour Party, the impact is that if Keir Starmer were somebody who believed in the values that Joe Cox believed in, then not only would the Labour Party be alive, but it would be quite possible for the Labour Party to base its program and its offerings to the people, to the electors, to justifiably expect to be the party of government after beating the Conservatives. But that is a million miles away from where the Keir Starmer is and his politically murdered Labour Party spokespeople are. That is possible, but it's not being adhered to, is the reality of the finding on the evidence, on the facts that we are world exclusively presenting here. And from this program, world diagnosis of the Fleet Street, world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. And the utter opposite of what Joe Cox stands for and stood for is in the ugly offerings of Priti Patel, who is condemning anti-racists by saying that England team playing gesture politics by taking the knee. She is hostile to the England team, even tokenistically taking the knee. So Priti Patel is not only as guilty of the anti-black racism as the murderers of the black people in the USA or anywhere else, but she is doing worse. She is condemning the opponents of racism after all the facts about the murder of George Floyd have become known and universally accepted as evidence. What does it make her, the daughter of two people who are of Indian Gujarati origin, but who were given asylum in Britain after the pair were expelled, as thousands of Asians were expelled by people in East Africa in the late 1960s, early 1970s. The other item, in terms of the news running order in our commentary, is of course the likely report. Whether it will be truthful or not is another matter, and we shall diagnose that, into the murder in 1987 of the investigator Daniel Morgan. Now, that was 34 years ago. Daniel Morgan was murdered for investigation. And even the Times and the Daily Mail and others are acknowledging that Daniel Morgan was murdered because he was investigating too closely the corruption in the police. And the fact that 34 years later, nobody has been charged with his murder or identified as being murderer or murderers of Daniel Morgan shows that the issues and the kind of activities and the perpetration and the behavior of the police that he was investigating are not only still continuing, but they are even worse than when he was murdered. Because 34 years later, nobody has been identified as being responsible for Daniel Morgan's murder. So that shows serial cover-ups continuing at every level concerned. And the fact that nobody has been identified is not an accident. If you look at the Crown Prosecution Service, the Crown Prosecution Service was headed by the Director of Public Prosecutions, a man called Keir Starmer, for 5 years. 5 of the 34 years, let's say, since Daniel Morgan was murdered. There is no evidence that the Crown Prosecution Service did anything to find out who murdered Daniel Morgan. It makes Keir Starmer criminally negligent. As criminally negligent as he is over the political murder of the Labour Party, with the implications for the whole country, the overwhelming majority of the people in this country who are entitled to have their democratic rights represented by a democratically active and rigorous opposition in Parliament on all issues that affect life, affect society. Starmer is dead. Not only has he politically murdered the Labour Party, he is politically dead as well. And he was professionally dead when he was in post as the Director of Public Prosecutions for 5 years at the Crown Prosecution Service. So what would this man offer by way of, quote, opposition leadership? He couldn't offer anything. He could only offer what he has done to the Labour Party, politically murder it and politically kill any opposition that the official opposition in the House of Commons in the British Parliament would actually be able to offer. As we have said, when weeks before he actually left, that is after his retirement from the CPS became due after 5 years, Keir Starmer issued a number of rules or directives from his that justified the criminal or criminally intended attacks on some of the poorest people in this country. It is absolutely part of the statistics that any number of people in society experiencing financial hardship and low income and poverty, any number of people would be prone to look for excuses to technically commit fraud and crime in order to find money and make up for the loss of income or make up for the low income. That is accepted as a statistical reality. But it is also important to recognize at the same time that many of the people would be completely honest, 100% honest, and would never want to make up any stories or accounts in order to get money by your benefit. Now that is a big, significant difference. And that difference, to recognize that difference, is the responsibility of any responsible, conscientious, moral, ethical opposition, or political party, or political institution, or political organization, or political entity, governmental entity, which is where Keir Starmer, as the just about to retire from the DPP, as the DPP, made the mistake or committed the crime of categorizing some of the poorest people as criminals. He was not a conservative officially, and he officially never has been a conservative, as far as you know, from accessible records. And yet, there he was, making a brazen conservative, far-right fascistic aim part of the normal rules of the Crown Prosecution Service. Even Ian Duncan Smith, whom we have called Dracula Duncan Smith because of his role in the massacre of the poorest people who were forced to commit suicide by that pressure that was put by withholding money from them that they needed. Even Dracula Duncan Smith has not articulated those particular words of hatred and criminality that Keir Starmer did when he was about to retire as the DPP against the people that needed most of the help. So what we shall be doing is continuing on this theme of finance. Remember what he started. Martin Wolf in the Financial Crimes, and the lack of references in Gillian Reynolds' piece in the I newspaper to society. In her review or promotion, ingratiating promotion of the first, based on the broadcasts of the first two launch days of the ghastly garbage bullshit, also known as Briloped's GB News.